So you guys, this season we're doing this series called Making Room. It's really our theme for the entire holidays this year. Hey, how do we make room? And we talked about the very first week the fact that when you have to make room, you have to do it on two different levels. One is you have to make room externally. You can't just do it without doing something, right? You have to kind of carve out some room. You have to make some margins in order to do things. And so you have to do it externally. But frankly, it's not just about external things, right? It's about internal things too. You have to create room internally, inside of you, inside of your soul, inside of your heart, inside of just kind of this emotional world that we live in. You have to make some room in there. And that's the hard part, right? That's a challenge to the whole thing, is making room on the inside. And so we're kind of focusing on those two things of making room both externally and internally. Now, last week, as Jonathan said, we talked about the fact that we need to make room for others. And I love the passage that he used as those guys brought the paralytic to Jesus, and they couldn't get in the house. It was too crowded, and so they went up on the roof, and they dug through the dude's roof and made a big hole enough to let him down through. And he said, the one thing that this guy needs is to meet Jesus face to face. Isn't that really true? The one thing we actually need deep down in us is to meet Jesus face to face. Someday it's going to happen literally in a physical level. But today, in a spiritual way, obviously in a very incredible way, you can meet Jesus face to face. Changes life. It changes everything. It changed the life of the paralytic. It'll change the life of every person. So, and today we want to talk about making room for the unexpected. For the unexpected in life. The things unplanned for. You didn't think about it. You didn't ask for it. You didn't invite it. It's the unexpected in life, right? So to start it today, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to put a blue line up there. Okay? And here's the blue line, and that represents your path in life, okay? And let's go to the mall here for a second, and at one end of that path, it's you are here, right? So right now, you are here. And that path goes in a direction, and let's put at the other end of that, the destination, wherever you're headed, and what it's all about. And the reality is that destination in our hearts and minds is usually pretty ideal. Right? There's an ideal place. You don't usually design wanting to go to a bad place. You want to go to, the destination being kind of a good thing. And so the destination is really, frankly, pretty ideal in all of this. Now, you know what? The reason you think that way is because you're made that way. You're made to think that way. That's how you're designed. Now, that seems to kind of be watered down in our lives. And it's watered down more and more and more in certain people's lives. It was interesting for Di and I. We spent the summer of 1985 ministering in Hungary, in Eastern Europe. And then it was still a communist nation. And so we had to be a little bit on the undercover side. We had a lot of fun. But we spent time at a place called Lake Balaton in Hungary. And basically our job was to go along the beaches of the lake and to approach people and say, "Hi, my name's Kevin. Do you speak English?" And because if they spoke Hungarian, I didn't do very well, And so I'm like, okay, we just kept looking for English speakers, either Hungarians or Germans or whatever. And we had one guy on our team, his name was Gene Young. And Gene would go along and he'd say to people, "Hey, do you speak English?" And they'd say, "No." And then he'd say, "Do you speak English?" And he'd yell at them. Because, if you don't speak English, at least you'll hear it if you yell louder at them. And you just talk to all these people. Well, one of the couples we got to know there was a biologist there at the lake. And during our time with him, he was a Christian, but he ended up saying to us one day, "You Americans are funny. Your movies are funny." And we said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "All of your movies end on a good note, a redemptive piece. None of our movies in Europe end redemptively because you're out of touch with reality. Life doesn't end well." We thought, isn't that interesting? Because as Americans, we almost expect things to end well, right? Hallmark movies, you always want those things to, you want them to end well. Well, guess what? There is a biblical worldview that actually is a story of redemption. It's not a story of perfection. It's a story of redemption. That things end well. If you read the end of the book, you read the end of the script in Revelation, things end marvelously, fabulously, gloriously. But you know what? They were intended to be that way from the very beginning. You know what? In Genesis chapters 1 and 2, it says this in the whole story of creation. It says in days 1 through 5 of creation, at the end of it, that it was good. Every time, at the end of each day of creation, it says, man, that's good. Right? The creation of the light and of darkness. The creation of all the things in the sea. Of things, all the creation, of all the vegetation. At the end of the day, God went, wow, that's good. That's good. Man, I like that. That's cool. The next day, he'd make something more. Well, it's interesting, at the day 6, where the creation of man and woman, he says something a little different. He says, now that's very good. That is very good. Wow. Do you know when that happened in heaven? The angelic world already existed. And when he made man and woman, in his image, the very first thing that was ever made in his image, the angelic world just had a collective gasp. His image. All over heaven it was heard. Wow, look at that. And it says it was very good. That's like totally cool. Not just cool. Totally cool. There was a beauty. In fact, there was a beauty in the garden that they walked daily with God and with each other. And all of their glory and all of his was revealed. All their glory, if you know what I mean. But it was an incredible place to exist. To walk with God and to walk with each other, Adam and Eve, with no shame or blame, no guilt, no tears, no pain. It was an amazing place. That was what life was created to be. We have something inside of our souls, something inside of us that aches for that. It's been watered down. It's almost been taken away. It's been eradicated from the human soul in some way, shape, or form. But that we still want that kind of picture in life, right? And yet, in fact, let's just show a few pictures. You know, this is a Thomas Kinkade, right? This is what we want Christmas to look like, really, right? This is what it should look like. You know, it shouldn't look like my house. It should look like that. You know, it's incredible. Or the inside should look like this, right? We all want our house to look like this. Don't you like, man, I wish that was my place, you know? That's the way it's a little washed out, but you can get the picture. You know, it's just an incredible thing. Or, you know, Norman Rockwell is kind of the designer of the ideal America, right? So this is the ideal America, man. Here we are. They walk in, and the little boy's like, Grandma and Grandpa, we're here. And everybody's going to be excited, right? Okay, that's exactly what it's supposed to look like. Or maybe this one. This is the ideal. You know, yeah. Okay, Santa Claus is kissing the wife, and she's like, look at that. She's in a really nice dress, and she's got her apron on, and she's so excited that he's kissing on her neck, and the son is watching, and this is the way it's supposed to be, right? I mean, every time you just say to your wife, hey, babe, I'm here, and I'm going to, you know, and she's like, oh, sweetheart. I'm so glad. You're amazing. You're the hottest thing ever, you know. How many of that happened to you this week? You know, I'm telling you, not one of you it happened. You know? But that's what we think it ought to be like. Or maybe this one, you know what? That night, the little boy with his mom prays. That's the way it's supposed to be. And yet sometimes it doesn't happen. You know, you're like, Or this is a great one, right? That night, little brother and sister fall asleep and Santa comes. Sweetest thing ever. You know, of course, they get up and they start fighting, you know, and they're like, whatever. But then reality, Norman Rockwell does do a little bit of reality, right? He's like, he's searching through Dad's dresser and he finds this Santa suit. Like, oh my gosh, life just changed. What's going on? Either Santa's doing bad things or what's happening here, you know? Well, that reality kind of hits all of us. The unexpected hits this path that we're on. And it's hard. And now here's the deal. Some of the unexpected things that happen are good things, right? They're unexpected, really just cool things. Problem is, those unexpected things that are cool, we expect, right? It's kind of built into us. We expect good things to happen, even above and beyond what we thought about. We expect those things to happen. But there's also some other unexpected things that are bad, the bad unexpected. It kind of upsets our equilibrium. It mars our humanity when that which is bad happens. And then you go, what is that all about? What in the world? And so in these bad that happen to us, let's just mark one spot. Let's put down here. Something happens in your life. And it kind of derails you, right? So let's just draw a line over to it. It kind of takes you over to this bad place. And here's what we do so often in our own lives and our own hearts, and we sometimes say it to others, is we draw a line like, okay, wait a second. Don't let it get you down. Let's just get right back up to that line of the ideal again, right? The expected. Let's just see if we can deny it, push it down, push it under the rug, and let's get back up to that ideal spot again. But we all know it really never works. It's really bad advice. It's really not good because you begin to deny your own feelings or the feelings of others or the reality of the tragedy or the difficulty. You just begin to deny it. And you say, well, let's get right back up to that line. And here's what I'm suggesting is that we were kind of made that way that we don't go back to the same path. Look at this in Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 1 and 2 is about creation and how beautiful it was, right? Genesis chapters 3 and 4 are all about the tragedy and what happens as a result. Look at this in chapter 3, verse 20. It says the man, and now this is after the curse has happened, after the fall and after the difficulty, and he says, life is now radically changed in your life. It's never going to get to be the same again. I'm going to set you on a new path. And it says the man called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. And she was. And there's something good still going on, but it's been marred. The humanity has been scarred, if you will. And then in verse 21, and the Lord God made for Adam and for his wife garments, skins, clothed them. For the very first time, there was death in the kingdom. And God is the one who did it. To give them something better than fig leaves that simply dry up and curl, he gives them animal skins that are more permanent to cover their shame, to cover their sin. And so something new is happening. It's not the old thing. In fact, look at this, verse 22. And then the Lord God said, behold, the man has become like one of us in knowing good and evil. He, not in his knowledge, just like, well, okay, now he's more aware or more intelligent. It means he's experienced both good and evil. And God never wanted that for us, to be intimately connected experientially with evil. And now we have become that. Now lest he reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Here's the deal. There were two key trees in the garden. One, the knowledge of good and evil, and there is one of the tree of life. They experienced from the tree of good and evil, the evil, and they were attracted to it and they were captured by it. And he said, do not eat any more from the tree of life. And you think, well, that's weird. Why wouldn't you? Because the tree of life made permanent the situation you were in. If they stayed in the garden and ate from the tree of life, their fallen state would have been permanent, always separated from their God. And he said, I can't afford for that to happen. So we're going to remove you. Look at this in verse 23. Therefore the Lord God sent him out of the garden of Eden to work the ground from which he was taken. I don't want you to stay in this permanent place of rejection and of separation from God. So I'm going to move you out of the garden. Verse 24. And he drove out the man at the east of the Garden of Eden. He placed a cherubim, a flaming sword, and turning every way to guard the way to the tree of life. And so at that entrance to the garden, he puts this cherubim with a big sword, and he's going all over the place with the sword, like, don't you dare come back in here. Not because he's saying to you, I hate you. Don't you dare come back in my good garden. I'm so mad at you. He's saying, no, if you come back in here, you'll make your fallen state permanent. I have something else for you, but I'm going to set that guard because we keep wanting to go back to the garden, right? Do you ever feel that way? When life goes south, something wrong happens, something tragic. You go, man, I just want to go back to the garden. I want to go back to that perfection. The problem is we've already blown that. And so in order to protect us, he set us on a new path, headed in a new direction, to a new tree. We're going to find the tree of life again in the book of Revelation, at the end of the scriptures. But you know what? There's also a tree of life. It's right down in the Gospels. It's one that Jesus was on. It's a tree of life. It looked like death because he gave his life there, but it's actually a tree of life for us. Because on that tree, he died for everything, every sin, every wrong that I've ever done, and that you've done. There's a tree of life. That's where we're headed down, is to guard that. Because we were made for something more, right? We were. So, instead of the destination being straight, we kind of get down. Let's go to this next one. Now we have a new trajectory to the destination. And we can see the old one. It's now a dotted line. We can see it and we keep wanting to go back to it. But reality is this. It's gone. So let's just erase it there. It's gone. We're never going back to that one. We are now on a new trajectory to that. God is doing something new and different in our lives to the same destination, but with a bit of a different path. So then our lives begin to look like this, right? I don't know if you were to chart out your life. It kind of looks like this, right? Okay, this good thing happens, this bad things happen, this, and we just go, man, my life's kind of crazy. And that's a pattern. That's a chart of every one of our lives, right? We could just put a name to every one of those dots. Boom, boom, boom. Probably 1,000 more dots. And all the things that change in all of that. That's our life right there. So let's just kind of go to a few of them. So let's go to this next one. From this place where we fall, there's kind of a new pattern, right? In my own life. I don't know exactly. I have a million of them. But for me, one of the first times that my life really, really changed was after graduation from college. Kind of everything had gone pretty well. I'd never really been rejected by too many people before that. I was like, I did pretty well. I mean, a few gals, but, that's expected in high school, right? No big deal. I got dumped and whatever. But 2 years after college, I applied to go on staff with Campus Crusade for Christ, and they turned me down. They said, you need to grow up. I tell you what, it rocked my world. It rocked it. And I had a new path. I had to decide, what am I going to do? Am I going to grow up? Or am I just going to kind of reject that? It put me on a whole new path. Well, I went on staff with Crusade 3 years later, and eventually 2 years after that, and it's maybe this next place, I met this gal named Diane. She was from North City, St. Louis. She was really neat. She's good looking, smart, intelligent. Like, wow. I started to chase her. I caught her. It was a miracle. But my whole life changed that day. My whole life changed because now I was doing it with this other person, right? But it was good, but it was all changed. And God was doing something along there. And then there's some other things that happened. She and I struggled with infertility. Never expected that. Who gets married expecting to struggle with that? Nobody. 1/4 of all couples struggle significantly with infertility. And we began to struggle with that. And that was like a total eye-opener, right? You're like, oh man, what do we do with that? Eventually the doctor said, I don't know what's the deal, but it's not going to happen. That was painful. Put us on a whole new trajectory in life. And after that, kind of in a good way, then the Lord led us to this adoption process. 3 kids and being adopted. Well, I'll tell you what, that changed our lives. It changed it forever. It's a new path, same destination, but a new path. It was different, right? Well, then some other things happened. I found myself in a job with Campus Crusade that wasn't a very good fit for me. I was struggling. 5 years in this job, I was struggling. In fact, I struggled so much, and it got worse. I got fired. I got canned. You ever been there? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. That's not a fun place to be when you get canned. And that was an eye-opening, life-changing experience. They just said, we want you to stay on staff. We want you to do some other things, but this isn't a good fit. Well, I knew it, but it was really painful, right? Well, several years later, we got called to this church in St. Louis. And it changed everything. Changed a lot of things, right? Then several years ago, by hook or by crook, we started this thing called Quest. That was a whole nother world. It's a new path. And so you think, okay, what's the common denominator here? Well, I would say this. A couple of things I've had to latch on to. I think maybe in all these places where it's the unexpected in our lives, and these are really old, traditional things I'm going to say, but I wonder if they are just as new today as they ever were. So when we grab onto this reality that there are times where the unexpected happens and it changes the trajectory of our lives. First of all, this one in Romans 8:28. He says this, "For we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." All those things work together for good. Now here's the deal. Sometimes we take that verse and we use it as a kind of a Band-Aid. Something bad happens and we just kind of take it out of the package and slap it on someone's life and say, hey, it's all going to work together for good. And not really wrestle with the reality of what that means. And it's not a simple little Band-Aid. They're hard things, painful things. And you guys, I kind of charted some up and down there. Some of you have been through things that are off the charts up and down. Off the charts. Difficult, challenging, unexpected, painful, disappointing, tragic inside of you. And yet in the midst of that reality, for those who love him, he causes all things to work together for good if you're called according to his purpose. He's working things out. And sometimes you get to see it. And sometimes you don't. But it is a deep down, gut, rock solid decision to say, am I going to trust that God is working all things together for good, even if I see it and even if I don't? In all the unexpected, uninvited, disappointing, painful, tragic things that we all go through. And here's a hard thing, right? All the ones of my past, there's going to be some in the future. I hate that part. There's going to be more. But in the midst of it, God says, I'm working it together for good. Trust me. Because what are the alternatives? It seems to me the alternatives are just get bitter, get angry at life. Just start throwing rocks and sticks and bits, being mad at everybody else and at God himself. Rather than understanding that maybe God has a plan. Maybe God's doing something. Maybe God is actually really sovereign. Maybe he actually is providential. Maybe he actually hasn't lost control. And to see it, I need to really make him my life so I can begin to see it and engage it and wrestle with it. All those difficult things. It seems to me there's one other. It kind of takes us to this Christmas story. In Matthew chapter 1, there's this announcement of all this happening. This child coming, the Messiah is coming. And it's written in Matthew 1, it says, "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel." Let's just stop there for a second. Have you guys ever wondered, why did God choose this particular way to reveal himself? I mean, wouldn't there be kind of a better way? And you can think of all sorts of ways that God might reveal himself, maybe in a large, blimp, that would fly over the world. It would draw more attention to me, it seems to me, than some little baby in Bethlehem. It seems like a better idea to me, or just some cataclysmic experience in the heavens. It's going to happen someday, just so you know, in Revelation. But wouldn't it be a better idea? Or wouldn't God have a better way? And I think the reality is no. It had to be a human that was divine. A child born to a human mother, but a virgin, with the Holy Spirit. It had to be someone that we could connect with, understand, and yet was different, and yet was the same. How would God ever reveal himself to mankind that would really make a difference? I don't know if there could have been any other way but the way he did it. It seems so strange, right? Little baby in this backward little town called Bethlehem, in a very backward little country, in a very backward time, a long time ago. Wouldn't it have been better to do it in Wildwood 2018? I mean, it would have, it's a cooler place, don't you think? than Bethlehem? No, it wasn't. God had this plan. God had this idea. And he shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. And when Joseph awoke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and he took his wife, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son. And he called his name Jesus, the one who would be with us. And so here's the amazing thought, is that when all of the unexpected happens in your life, you got to know two things, and you got to put your faith in it. Is that one is that he is working all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And secondly, he is with you on this new trajectory of life, this new place. He said, I will be faithful to you and I will not leave you. You guys, let me wrap up with this. Let me show you a picture. This is Lieutenant Charles Wesley Easterbrook. And his wife, Margaret, better known as Honey, because he called her Honey. And so even her son called her Honey, because he called her Honey. So it worked out well. And so this is Margaret in the middle, and then this young gentleman on the left-hand side is a guy named Charles Wesley Easterbrook Jr., better known to us as Nap, who sits right back over there. And Nap got his name from his dad, who was called Nap, who got it from when he was in high school. He played Napoleon in a high school play, and everybody called him Napoleon, and they shortened it to Nap. And then, so it was Big Nap and then Little Nap, and Little Nap is among us today. And this is a picture from around 1941. Let me just read you something that Nap wrote as a result of this. Look at this. It was December 7th, 1941. That's the day of Pearl Harbor. He says, my parents and I took a nice day trip along the coast from our home in Pacific Grove to Fort Ord, California. During World War I, this area was designated as an artillery training field by the Department of War. Now, only a year before, it officially became Fort Ord and expanded rapidly to prepare for the possibility of World War II coming across the ocean and drawing America into it. We settled down amongst hundreds of soldiers and their families to watch a show sitting in the open-air theater of the Pacific Ocean as the backdrop. Anybody ever been there? It's incredibly beautiful. It's like, wow. So it says the Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy show, which is a radio show, normally heard on radio every Sunday afternoon, was entertaining us live. They were there as a huge attraction for everybody. Were entertaining us. In addition to the Bergen-McCarthy show, Abbott and Costello were there performing their routine. It was quite a thrill and great fun seeing these acts that I had only heard on the radio. Next, in the middle of the show, the host came out and everything came to a standstill. We all held our breath. He begins to list various regiments and battalions and announces, will all the members of these regiments and battalions report to the barracks and prepare for overseas movement because the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor. As a collective gasp went up across the theater, in the stands and on the lawn, soldiers everywhere stood up kissed their families goodbye and headed out of the arena. We didn't leave immediately because shortly after that, we went back to our home in Pacific Grove, and that was my introduction to the Second World War. I was 9 years old. The trajectory of America changed that day. There have been other times when the trajectory of our country changed. But let me just personalize it if I can. Can I ask you this? What are your Pearl Harbors? What are your Pearl Harbors? These unexpected issues or events, uninvited, unwelcomed, things that happen in life, large or small. Some are self-inflicted. Others are perpetrated upon us by others. But what are your Pearl Harbors that significantly alter the trajectory of your life from the ideal that you deeply ache for? What are they? What are the Pearl Harbors in your life? And how will you deal with those? So then I have two just thoughts, maybe that will bring you to a place of wrestling with this. Two questions. First of all is this. Are you willing to trust that God intends to cause all the unexpected things of your life to work together for good in the long run, if you love him and are called according to his purpose? Are you willing to trust him that he intends to work this out? He hasn't lost control. Of all the things in your past, and even the things in your future. Either that, or you're going to live a life of confusion and isolation and loneliness and bitterness and anger. Or there is a God who is in charge, and somehow he's working it together for good. This Christmas, as you try to make room for the unexpected, are you willing to go there? To deal with the hurt, the loss, the pain, the bitterness, the anger? Are you willing to deal with it? And say, okay, God, I've done it to myself, or someone's done something to me. But this is between you and me, God. And I'm going to trust you that you're going to work it together for good. Second question. Are you willing to travel the inevitably unpredictable paths of life with the only guarantee that you can count on of that being that God will be with you? You know, actually life is a risk, isn't it? Every day it's an adventure. There are no guarantees. There's no guarantee that we will each be in this room next week. Now, more likely we will be. But there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee of this afternoon. The only guarantee I have is he said, I'll be with you. Wherever you go, whatever life brings you, whatever those unexpected tragedies are in life, I'm working it together for good, and I'm going to go with you. I will not abandon you. I haven't forgotten you. You haven't lost me. I am with you. That's why Jesus came. And then he said, I'm going to come back again, you guys. And between now and then, I'm going to leave the Holy Spirit to be here, to live inside of you. But I'm not leaving you alone. I'm coming back. And when I come, there's going to be on my thighs are going to be written Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And I'm going to take over. But between now and then, trust me that I'll be with you. That's why he came at Christmas time. It's what we can grab onto. Are you willing to do that? And to trust that he's working everything together in the long run for your good? And that he'll be with you. I wonder if that might make Christmas very different. Because as you go through Christmas, there are going to be things that don't happen according to expectation. People are going to be late. People are going to burn the turkey. One of your children isn't going to come home for Christmas. You'll be disappointed. All sorts of things, right? Those are all small. There are bigger things that will happen. Is there room in your life for the unexpected? Is there room to let God be doing his thing? And that you trust him. And that he'll be with you. That might make Christmas totally different, right? All right, let's pray.